everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. As you can tell from the title up there, I have seen the new movie Man of Steel. It's the day after I saw it, or technically the day I saw it, because I saw it the midnight showing. And as you can tell, since there's no title that says rant up there, or in the description box, I like the movie. Just in case you're wondering, here's the ticket. Yes, I bought it early and printed it at home. Got a problem with that? But anyway, Man of Steel, directed by Zack Snyder, which this is Snyder's sixth movie, I'd had to recount. And so far with him, he's more of a director. I like his movies and hate him, like Dawn of the Dead, excellent remake, textbook example of how to do a remake properly. 300 and Watchmen, good comic book adaptations. Legends of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things about it. Sucker Punch, was the name not a clue? His only misstep so far, but I have to say he made up for Sucker Punch with this film. And of course the movie stars Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, Diane Lane, Kevin Costner, Laurence Fishburne, Russell Crowe, and and it even has a small appearance by Christopher Nolan. Now, the story for the movie was composed by David Goyer, and I was actually surprised to see this when the credits came on, Christopher Nolan. Now, before any of you jump to anything, in this case, Nolan actually being involved in the screenplay was a positive. Because I will say this, Nolan's idea on Batman, you guys all know I'm not a fan of his realistic tone. I think Batman Begins is okay. I can tolerate his realistic approach in the second film, mostly because of the villains and how he approached the film. You guys all remember my thoughts on the third film. I just think it's okay at best, but it was a lot of lost potential. That's just me. Here, his and Goyer's idea for Superman, I think works for a reboot, and totally makes the film its own thing, while still being true to the core essence of the character. And of course the screenplay is totally written by Goyer, and of course we all know Goyer. We've known stuff he's done, but in case any of you need a refresher course in what Goyer has written, I'm about to go and tell you what he's written. He has written films like Kickboxer 2, Demonic Toys, you're looking at, yeah, that's his writer, just making sure. The Crow, City of Angels, Dark City, Blade, and its two sequels, excuse me. He also directed the third one. Of course, he was involved with the Dark Knight trilogy, Jumper, The Unborn, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. He just came up with a story for it. And after this, he's involved in an Invisible Man film and the Godzilla reboot. With TV, he was involved with Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's that one Nick Fury movie with David Hasselhoff as the character. And of course, as a director, other than Blade Trinity, he also directed The Unborn and a movie called Zigzag. So he basically he has a hit or miss one, but I think he hit with this one. And this is actually pretty close to say whether I like Blade or whether one of his Blade films or this or one of his films he's done. Because I can honestly say I probably do like this film a little bit more than Dark Knight, but probably a second view will be able to tell that for sure. But so far, I can definitely say this is probably my favorite comic book movie Nolan has been involved with. Like I said, close between it and Dark Knight. But here's the sad thing that I find, though. With the audience, it is an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not going to bring up the IMDb score because it doesn't have a set one at this time. So 82%, so 8 out of every 10 people enjoy the film. It has a 57% with the critics. I find that very, very sad. And this is what their consensus is. Superman's return to the big screen is mostly successful, as the Man of Steel provides enough exhilarating action and spectacle to overcome its occasional detours into generic blockbuster territory. With that last part, I don't know what movie they were watching. I mean, granted, there are some blockbuster stuff in it, but it's stuff that fits. Fight scenes, grand special effects. For a character like Superman, you need stuff like that. Granted, the original films did it, but it did it in a different way because of the technology available at the time. Granted, I think practical effects is superior to CGI, but I'm not going to get into that right now, but for what they had at the time, they did it well. I think it's probably just coming from the fact that they used a lot of CGI. Granted, I will say it looked good a lot of the time. There was a few moments where the CGI was noticeable. You know, the part where you're like, okay, they could have improved that, but it didn't really take me away from the film. And I thought their interpretation of everything I thought was pretty good, because, as I'll get into. Now, in its basic form, Man of Steel is basically if you were to take the very basic premise of the first two Superman movies, take away every specific plot detail, just take the basic core of the story, you know, Superman being sent from his planet, landing on Earth, being raised as a human, becoming a hero, and then having to fight General Zod. That's basically the plot of the new Superman movie in a nutshell. At its essence. When you get into specific plot details, how the characters act, characterization, character development, and all that, totally different. I mean, if you had never watched, if your only knowledge of Superman was from the Christopher Reeves movies, and of course, Superman Returns, and you were to watch this movie, totally different. In which I applaud the movie for that they actually made it its own thing. Granted, even though, like I said, even though I don't like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, it did it its own thing when compared to the Burton Schumacher films. This one, I think, they just did it better. Now, of course, the one thing I will say that I thought was a little, I don't know what the proper word for it. I wouldn't say unusual. I don't really know how to describe this and get down my thought in it. It was surprising, I guess you could say how it was, is that a lot of Clark's childhood is shown in flashbacks. I thought it was going to be kind of like how the first Superman movie did, you know, show it chronologically, but I think in this case, showing it in flashbacks at times actually works to the film's advantage a little bit. I mean, of course, we start off with, you know, the whole Kryptonian thing, and then of course it just goes back and forth a lot of the movie. I think that works because the thing that this film mostly deals with when the character of Superman is concerned is that he's basically coming to terms with who he is. Now, that's one thing that, even though Reeves' film is a great film, that's one thing it seems to skim over a little bit. I mean, we see him becoming a hero, but it never shows him really fully coming to terms with his powers. We just see him as a baby, then we see him as a teenager, and he knows he has special powers, but not why. Then we see him, you know, meet his father's hologram, and then shows a little bit of talking with them, and then he just skips and he's trained for years and knows how to use his powers wisely. But never really any character development showing him coming to terms with his powers and how to use them responsibly. And that's basically what a lot of the character development is here, because as we see throughout his childhood, Clark knows he has the powers, and his parents do, and they're always telling him that he has to control them. Like, one thing that they do is something that which is kind of mentioned a little bit in the Reeves film, but is very subtly, and that is Superman, you know, being able to hear a lot of things and see with all different types of vision. You would have to learn how to control that. One of the pinnacle scenes early on in the movie nails home how this is something you really would have to focus and control, because if you don't, it will cause you to go temporarily insane. And it was an interesting scene. And of course, there's also the fact of using your powers wisely, you know, not punching someone just because you want to punch them, not destroying someone because you have more power than them. Because that's the thing of, I know it's Marvel, but, you know, as Uncle Ben said in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's kind of the theme of this movie a little bit as far as Clark is concerned. He has to learn how to use his power responsibly. And of course, you can see that in the trailers, you know. You're going to have to find out what kind of man you want to be. Even if it takes the rest of your life, you owe that to yourself. And of course, that's why Clark, you know, was doing all that stuff, you know, like working on a crab fishing boat and stuff. He's trying to learn how to use his powers. And of course, you could tell when he does eventually find out where he's from, he does learn how to use his powers, partially due to him wanting to help the humans like his parents wished, and partially because of Zod coming down, which I will say he escapes from the Phantom Zone like he does before, but it's different, and I thought it was interesting how they did this. And just for the record, with some of the stuff they mentioned, you could potentially, if you did the story right, set up Brainiac in a sequel. But that's just me. Now, Lois Lane is in the film early on, which I was a little surprised at, actually. Because I thought she wasn't going to be until later, but it was a pleasant surprise because they made the character a little bit different, and Adams as Lois Lane is a completely different character than Kidder was as Lois Lane, which is pretty good. That's the one thing I like, is that the characters, you believe them as the same individual, same character, just different individuals, different continuities. Michael Shannon as General Zod. Totally different character as well, with similar motives. He wants to take over Krypton and, purify it. Zod and Jor-El do have a similar conversation to what they have in the Reeves film, but different wording in different context. But it's basically for the same aim. But there's more of a little friendly rivalry between them in there than it's more shown than actually just hinted at like it was in the Reeves film. And another thing they add into that is that the Reeves film never really talks about Kryptonian reproduction and people's places in society. This one, it really nails it home into it, and it kind of does it in an allegorical way. Because how they portray Kryptonians here is allegorical to one negative thing that could eventually happen to human society, and that is we get so full of ourselves with our power and all that we begin to lose focus and basically start to become super corrupt and decay from within and eventually destroy ourselves, which sadly might one day happen to humans. But another thing is when it comes to reproduction and destiny. Now, the reason I mention these together is that they're intertwined in the film. Now, I don't know if in the comics, if this is something taken directly from it or invented for the film. Either way, it's an interesting idea. In Kryptonian society, as portrayed in the film, babies are made artificially, from DNA. And then they're basically raised to be like whatever society needs, a general, a politician, doctor, etc. So basically, the Kryptonians raise babies like ants and other insects, basically, in its most basic form. So Zod, was trained from birth to be a general, for example. So he doesn't really have a destiny. Which, of course, that kind of connects with that one thing that we see in the trailer. What if he aspired to be something greater? Which that goes with part of the character of Jor-El, and it goes into Kal-El as well. And of course, it connects with why Kal-El's parents decided to have a child naturally, so that the child would have the gift of choice. And that's the whole reason with destiny, because Zod, because of how he was raised, his only destiny is what was programmed into him, basically. Even though he's a flesh and blood creature, he basically has a programming, and that is to protect Krypton. And even though he's going about it the wrong way and is trying to do with genocide, he is doing what he thinks is best for Krypton. And of course, Kal-El, on the other hand, he wants to do what's best for both people, which is why I do agree with what he does by the end of the movie, and it is justifiable. And of course, basically what the plot of the movie is, he could still save Krypton in his own way. Now, I know I'm saying Krypton, but just so you the record, the planet does blow up. I'm not going to just spoil the plot point when I mean by why I'm saying Krypton and all that, because that's a major spoiler. Kevin Costner and Diane Lane as Jonathan and Martha Kent, I thought they did a pretty good job as the parents. And I know some people, when that one trailer with Costner telling, Costner's character telling Clark he should have let the kid die, I know that sparked a little bit of a minor complaint when the trailer first debuted. But after watching the movie, I can see what he means by it, because now this is going to bring in a real life situation. Whether you believe in aliens or not, if we found out there were aliens, you know how we humans are, you know how we would react. The film actually taps in a little bit into that, even more so considering that Kryptonians look like humans. So that's basically the part of the reason why he says that. As parents, they're very believable, and you can buy them as, their family bond. And another thing is, this is one thing I think that this film does a little bit better than the Reeves film does, and that is what happens to Jonathan Kent. Obviously, I'm going to say, if you've seen the original film, you know he dies there. He dies here too. Not really much of a big spoiler. You could probably figure out what was going to happen. Here's the thing, though. In the original Reeves film, it's a heart attack, which, really can't. The only way Kal-El could have prevented it is if he had gotten into the hospital quick enough. In this film, it's something even more preventable. I'm not going to spoil what it was, but it's something that if he wanted to, he could have saved him. So, the guilt right there, and another thing of wanting to honor his foster father's memory. Russell Crowe as Jor-El, his character development pretty good. it kind of, even though they don't mention it, they do kind of still have a little bit of that the son becomes the father and the father becomes the son thing, but it's very, very subtle. I guess maybe it's something only I noticed, but I did good, and Crowe did a good job as Jor-El as well. Different character than what Marlon Brando did. Also, obviously, because unlike Brando, he actually memorized his lines. I know I just had to do that, but he did a very good job. Now, Henry Cavill as Superman, I will say, totally different than what Christopher Reeve did with his performance, but then again, the different ones. Whereas Reeves was more, based on the comics at the time and how Superman normally is shown in adaptations. Here, there's some of that, but it's done in, I know some people are probably going to jump when I use this word, in a more realistic manner. But before you start jumping, it's not the same type of realism that Nolan's Batman was. Granted, it's in a more, if you want to think about it, think of it more realistically like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like they approach it as an adaptation and they want to be as faithful as possible, but they still make changes to make it different so that, there are some minor differences. And it fits more in a live-action version. Like, for example, Thor, instead of them being gods, they're aliens with advanced technology. That's done to make more sense for live action and to mesh more well with the whole universe as a whole. Here, in Man of Steel, what they did was something I mentioned earlier, tapping into that whole fear of what would happen if humans found out they were aliens. And that's basically what they do with Kal-El, because it's basically like a first contact thing, as we see in the trailers, Superman being handcuffed and all that. That's connected to that, and it's also connected to that thing we see in the other trailer where Zod's demanding they turn over Superman. Which, by the way, they actually do have a funny explanation for why they call him Superman. That scene we see in the trailer with Lois about to call him, they actually do cut that off like they do in the trailer. It's basically the military that comes up with it. I thought it was kind of funny how they did it. It's like, they're en route with Superman. What? That's what they're calling him. I got a chuckle out of that. It's a totally different character, like I said, and it works for it. And it also works with that whole angle about the alien thing. And I will say this, Cavill did Superman more justice than Roth did. And it's hard for me to say if I like him or Reeve better, but I think I probably like them equally, considering that they're different Supermans and they do the character justice in their own unique way. Granted, no one's going to replace Superman in the eyes of the public image. When they think of Superman, they instantly think of Christopher Reeve. And of course, dun 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 dun, that classic Superman theme. Which, since I just brought up the theme, I might as well mention the music. The music, Hans Zimmer's score for the film fits Superman, and you're working for Zod, aren't you?
Call from
I'm not gonna kneel before him. I'll get a kryptonite bullet and shoot his ass.
Call from Shuri.
It's always the phone.
Call from.
It better be Krypton. It better be Superman on the other end. But anyway, it's a very good score, and even though I didn't actually cry during the movie, there were times where I was close to it because of how the score was. Once again, a good example of how music is a very powerful instrument when it comes to storytelling. Amy Adams as Lois Lane, good performance. A lot better than the actress they had for Returns. Different, like I said, it's kind of like comparing her to Kidder, different characters, both equally good performances. And I'm glad they picked her over, even though I like Olivia Wilde, I don't think she probably would have been, she might have done an interesting Lane, but I think Adams was a better choice. Miley Kunis, no. And Kristen Stewart, hold on. Gotta restrain the Hulk, don't want the Hulk to come out. And Michael Shannon as General Zod, good performance. Like I said earlier, different than what was done in the original films, but it's kind of a good thing. And good performance. Laurence Fishburne as Perry White. He's a similar yet different character than what was portrayed before, and Laurence, he has his own stamp on the character for here. And did a pretty good job, and you believe him and you can actually buy him as a realistic editor-in-chief. Let's see. Even though she's a minor character in the movie in the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing this name, so forgive me. Eilert Zurer plays Lara, which is Jor-El's wife. She does a pretty good job for what she has to do. Christopher Maloney, or Maloney, or however you pronounce it. You know, the guy who plays Stabler in SVU. He did a pretty good job for his role. I thought he was going to be a minor character, but I'm glad. I like that he had more time, and I do like his last moment in the film. It brought a smile to my face. I'm like, ugh! I'm not going to spoil what it was, but those of you who've seen the movie, you'll probably know what I mean. Now, overall and in conclusion, Man of Steel is an excellent reboot. And I have to say, after watching this, I hope this does for the Justice League what Iron Man did for the Avengers, because I have a feeling that we will get a Justice League after that, but I hope they take notes from the Avengers and, you know, like, build it up slowly. Now, of course, I'm going to probably do a whole video on that on its own maybe one day. But it is a reboot that I will say, if you are a fan of the Superman character at all, whether it be from the comics, the Reeve movies, the animated series, whatever, the TV series, or even Smallville, I don't care. I say go watch it in theaters. Whether or not now, it doesn't matter now. Could be today, could be tomorrow. Could be right before the theater run ends, or even wait till DVD. I don't care. It's a movie that is basically a much watch for Superman fans. I know I didn't really go into the plot that much in this one, but I didn't really want to give away much of the plot with this one. My rating for Man of Steel, 4.5 out of 5 stars. And this is definitely probably going to be one of my favorite films of the year. So far, I have to say, this is probably my favorite film of the year. I haven't ranked them yet, but it's definitely probably it so far. Okay, guys, this is one last thing I actually forgot to talk about in the review, so this is just a bookend. Sorry if the video quality goes down, but I decided to just use the Windows Movie Maker thing instead of just bringing up my normal capture thing again. But anyway, to the point. Like the original films, if I remember correctly, they do go into a little bit about how Superman does get powers here, and it's like part of the minor reason they decided to send Superman here. And it's interesting, of course, you know, it's the usual thing. The sun's younger, he soaks in the radiation more, gives him stuff. And he does seem to have the basic power Superman has, not the more elaborate ones. You know, he can fly, he can jump, super strength, endurance to damage. You know, the different types of visions, like heat vision and all that. But he doesn't seem to have the more elaborate ones, like, I can travel back in time! None of that stuff, so I was glad for that. I hope they keep that, all those more plot ones out of the film series, but that's just me. But another thing I thought was interesting was that this is one thing that movies like this, or stuff like this, don't seem to usually bring into it. Sometimes it's because it's not important, or sometimes probably didn't think of it. And that is the atmospheric differences between Krypton and Earth. Now, even if we're similar in built, there is going to be at least minor differences. And part of it, I think, would do the fact that Krypton circles a red sun, whether it's a red dwarf or a red supergiant, doesn't matter. Maybe in the more specific things it does. And we circle a main sequence star, a yellow sun. There's going to be minor ones. And of course it goes into it where Superman is adjusted to Earth's climate since he was basically here for 33 years. So we know when he's in a Kryptonian-like climate, he's going to be suffering from it. And vice versa, where at first they have to adjust to it, but they adjust to it a little bit easier. It doesn't explain what it is, but I'm guessing there's a minor oxygen difference and all that. That's just my guess. Whether or not there's more oxygen on Krypton or less or something, doesn't matter, but there's going to be a minor thing, and it also affects humans, which makes sense for me.